until 31st May. We get you a 360-degree comprehensive perspective on the situation. Remember, today is day 54 of the lockdown. It is the last day of lockdown 3.0, but lockdown 4.0 will be on for 2 weeks till 31st May. How will India navigate the next few weeks and what will it entail? An eminent panel of guests will join me to help you make sense of it all. Also on the show, a deep dive into the fifth and last tranche of the economic package, what's in it for education and health sectors, and how will the new measures help Indian industry, plus all the other news from India and around the world. All right, then let's get started. First up, the headlines. Lockdown extended across India till 31st May. Public gatherings are prohibited. Schools, malls and restaurants remain closed. Flights and metro services to be suspended. Religious gatherings remain prohibited as well. Curfew between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. States get more say in lockdown 4.0. Interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses allowed with mutual consent. States can impose additional restrictions if required. Some relief in the offing for people. Restaurants allowed to deliver food at home. Sports complexes will be allowed to open, but without spectators. The Finance Minister unveils a fifth and last tranche of reforms under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, decides to privatize PSUs in non-strategic sectors. Bankruptcy filings triggered by loan default suspended for 1 year. More funds for Rural Employment Guarantee Act. PM Modi welcomes the announcements. PM E-Vidya program for access to online education to be launched. Also to be launched is Manodarpan, an initiative for psychological support to students, teachers and parents. Health sector reforms include infectious diseases, hospital blocks in every district. Further enhancement of ease of doing business envisaged by easing insolvency provisions. Minor violations of Companies Act to be decriminalized. Government underlines the need for a new coherent policy with all sectors open to private players. States welcome the decision to increase the borrowing limit of the states from 3% to 5% for the year 2021. Active COVID-19 cases in India nears the 54,000 mark with more than 2,800 deaths. Recovery rate at 37.5% with more than 34,000 recoveries. Over 46 lakh cases worldwide and 3,11,000 deaths. Almost 17 lakh patients recover globally. And 17 NDRF teams deployed in Odisha and West Bengal in view of the approaching cyclone Amphan. Odisha asks 12 of its coastal districts to prepare to deal with any eventuality. All right, let's get you all the information and the updates on the big story we are tracking here on DD India and DD News. The lockdown has been extended by 2 more weeks till 31st May. Now, in an order, the National Disaster Management Authority, or NDMA, has said that lockdown measures need to be extended by 2 weeks to 31st May to contain the spread of COVID-19. Right, now that we've told you that the lockdown has been extended till 31st May, you should also know the guidelines to be followed during the period of lockdown. Take a look at the following graphics on your screens, which give you a sense of what is allowed and what is not. First up, the lockdown will be enforced till 31st May 2020. First, take a look at the activities that will not be allowed. All domestic and foreign air travel will be prohibited. metro rail service, schools, colleges, educational, training or coaching institutions, hotels, restaurants, and other hospitality services. But restaurants shall be permitted to operate kitchens for home delivery of food items. Moving on, all cinemas, shopping malls, gymnasia, swimming pools, entertainment parks, theaters, bars, auditoriums, and assembly halls will be prohibited. Sports complexes and stadia will be permitted to open, but spectators will not be allowed. Moving on, all social, political, sports, entertainment, academic, cultural, religious functions or other gatherings and large congregations will be banned. Also, all religious places or places of worship shall be closed for public. And finally, religious congregations are strictly prohibited. Now, moving on to activities that are permitted under Lockdown 4.0, but with some restrictions. Interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses with mutual consent of the states or UTs concerned. Next up is interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses. This is intrastate within the state. Moving on to containment zones, buffer zones, red, green, and orange zones. The delineation of red, green, and orange zones will be decided by respective state and UT governments. Now, within the red and orange zones, containment zones and buffer zones will be demarcated by the district authorities concerned. Next up, a focus on the containment zones. Now, in containment zones, only essential activities shall be allowed. Strict perimeter control to ensure that there is no movement of people in or out of these zones. Now, intensive contract tracing, house-to-house surveillance, and other clinical interventions will be conducted in these containment zones. Next up, information about the night curfew. The movement of persons shall remain strictly prohibited between 7 p.m. and 7 in the morning. Now, protection of vulnerable persons. Now, persons above 65 years of age, persons with comorbidities, pregnant women and children below 10 years of age shall stay at home except for essential or health purposes. All other activities will be permitted except those which are specifically prohibited. Further, states and UTs, based on the assessment of the situation, may prohibit certain other activities in various zones or impose such restrictions as deemed necessary. Next up, a look at the Arogya Setu app. Now, employers should ensure the Arogya Setu app is installed by all employees having compatible mobile phones. Now, special directions to ensure movement of persons and goods in certain cases. Now, state and UT governments shall not dilute these guidelines issued under the Disaster Management Act 2005 in any manner. Next up, the COVID-19 management. Now, wearing a face cover is compulsory in all public and workplaces. Spitting in public and workplaces shall be punishable with a fine. Next up, social distancing shall be followed by all patients in public places. And marriage-related gatherings shall ensure social distancing, and not more than 50 guests will be allowed. Now, funeral and last rites-related gatherings shall ensure social distancing as well, but not more than 20 people will be allowed. Also, consumption of liquor, pan, gutka, tobacco in public places will not be allowed. Also, shops will ensure minimum 6 feet distance. In other words, 2 gaz ki duri among customers, and shall not allow more than 5 persons at a shop at any given period of time. Additional measures for workplaces include the practice of work from home should be followed at all times. Staggering of work or business hours shall be followed by everyone. Provision for thermal scanning, hand wash, and sanitizer will be made at all entry and exit points and common areas as well. Next up, frequent sanitization of entire workplace shall be ensured. Social distancing, adequate gaps between shifts, staggering lunch breaks of staff to be ensured as well. Right, now to the other news we're tracking here on Newsnight. Cabinet Secretary Rajiv Gauba is directly engaging by a video conference with states tonight for further elaboration of state-specific issues regarding Lockdown 4.0, under which states have to decide various zones and activities to be allowed in these zones. A limited number of activities to remain prohibited throughout the country as well. But states have the liberty to decide details regarding containment zones and red, orange, and green zones. states can permit all other activities outside containment zones, that's other than the limited number of activities prohibited across the country. Right, let me bring in my guests at this point in time. Joining me in the studio are my guests, Mr. Shekhar Iyer. He's a senior journalist with me in the studio. Also with me in the studio is Dr. A.K. Varshney from the RML Hospital in New Delhi. And joining me remotely from New Delhi is Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director of Business Standard newspaper. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on Newsnet. Appreciate it. First up to you, Mr. Shekhar Iyer, your thoughts on the lockdown 4.2 to begin with.
Well, we can see that some important changes have been made, some important relaxations have been given. Now it's left to the state governments to see how this can be implemented so that the economic activity can pick up, and also hardships relating to travel of people can also be removed. We can also see that after the discussions that the Chief Ministers had with the Prime Minister a few days ago, and the constant dialogue that has been going on between the Cabinet Secretary, the Union Home Secretary and the Chief Secretaries, a lot of ideas have been put together to ensure that this lockdown 4.0 takes into account the threat continued to be posed by the coronavirus. At the same time, also takes into account the fact that the economic activity, wherever it is possible, wherever you have declared orange and green zones, there this economic activity can actually be restarted. So therefore, overall, the idea is to lessen the hardship for people, at the same time not to give up guard, particularly on the incidence of, or the possibilities of infection. Because what we have seen is, even as we have to allow people to resume normal activity, the challenge from the spread of infection, that has to also be kept in mind. So overall, you can see a balance has been affected, but at the same time, repeatedly there is warning and insistence that all the social distancing guidelines and also personal protection that is required for all people who are involved in the public space has been re-emphasized.
Right. If I can ask you, Dr. Varshney, from a medical standpoint, how would you describe lockdown 4.2? You think it is timely and necessary at the same time?
As has been experienced with all over the world, those countries who didn't do the lockdown timely or late hour, they have the rampant number of cases. Fortunately, our Prime Minister took the initiative very early, and still, so that we were able to contain the disease to a large extent. Still, the cases in our such a big country of 130 crore people, we are having less than 1 lakh people. 1 lakh person who are affected with the disease, and mortality is around 3.2%. So definitely every mortality is very painful, but still we are able to contain. And largely in our country, we have seen the experience that in certain zones, what we call the red zones, the disease is confined in those places. To large extent, the green zone and orange zone, there is no infected cases. So definitely we have to start the activity also, economic activity also, and other medical facility also, because during this lockdown, many places our general OPD services as well as the routine surgery cases were not being done in the many hospitals. So that too we started, because beside the corona patient, there are all type of the patient, like heart patient, like dialysis patient, like any other type of emergency, stroke patient. So we have to take care of everyone. So definitely keeping in mind everything, a consensus decision has been taken to extend the lockdown and also permitting the certain activities in the green zone and orange zone, so that that disease is also contained and spread, infection and economic activity and other activity also start.
Absolutely. If I can go to my third guest on the show tonight, Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, who is joining us remotely from New Delhi. Mr. Bhattacharya, if I can come to you now. Prime Minister Modi has spoken about, in the first installment of lockdown, he spoke about Jaan hai to Jahan hai. Then he moved to Jaan bhi, Jahan bhi. And now we saw the economic package being rolled out. So in hindsight, you think we've taken the right steps throughout these weeks of lockdown, and that the focus is clearly on striking the right balance between life and livelihood?
Well, I think the government has taken quite a few steps
Right.
as far as the economic package is required to address the challenges arising out of COVID-19 and the lockdown. It is a mix of some financial support from the government's own fisc and Reserve Bank of India's liquidity measures, and also guarantees provided by the government to many of the loans that have been made available to the micro, medium, small units. And what is more important in the entire package, in my view, is a good component of this package is riding on a series of reformist measures and steps that are taken to fulfill a new policy of a self-reliant India without purportedly being isolationist or protectionist. So if you look at the entire package, you see financial allocations, liquidity measures, which can help the economy to address the supply side constraints, but not necessarily the demand side constraints. And at the same time, there are steps like the coal sector liberalization, like the FDI liberalization in the defense sector, like the Essential Commodities Act being amended. So there are so many, and then finally the most important thing is a roadmap being laid out for privatization of a large number of public sector undertakings which are not in the strategic sector. So if you look at the entire the gamut of the issues that have been touched upon in this last 5 days, you do get an impression that the government is trying to revive the economic sentiment as well as the pace of activity.
Just one quick follow-up question, Mr. Bhattacharya. What struck one in Prime Minister's speech recently was his choice of words. He spoke about an Indian economy which will see or give a quantum jump. He's not happy with a quote-unquote incremental change. And he also says a crisis contains a message and an opportunity. So in hindsight, having looked at the 5 installments of the package, you think we've more or less got the timing and the thrust correct?
Well, in some of the areas like the MSME sector being given an opportunity to bid for government procurement orders below 200 crore of value, where there will be no global tendering, it's a significant shift in the government policies. Similarly, to notify a list of weapons and platforms, but the government will not allow imports and instead allow foreign direct investment in the defense sector up to 74% on an automatic route. These are steps which we have not seen in the past. I'm not mentioning here the coal sector liberalization because that was something that was touched upon by the Parliament's law that was passed in March 2020. But if you look at or you look at the public sector's plan, privatization plan, that in only strategic sectors, which will be identified in the coming days, where you will have only 1 to 4 public sector companies, and in all other sectors, the public sector companies will gradually phase themselves out and will get themselves privatized. Now, these are steps that indicate a big shift, provided they are implemented and thought through. So I think there is a lot that we need to discuss and debate in the coming days as the government rolls out these policies.
Indeed. If I can come to you now, Dr. Varshney, looking back at the 54 days of the lockdown, you think India and Indians have shown the discipline and rigor to adhere to the guidelines, the norms, the advisories, protocols, and that we are in good stead going forward as well? There are 2 more weeks to go in lockdown 4.0. So is India prepared to continue the good work going forward as well?
Yes, by the experience of seeing the number of cases, we can certainly say that lockdown has been essentially successful. and definitely we should not fritter away the advantage of this success. So, the government has decided to continue the lockdown for another 2 weeks, but with the allowing the certain activity also in the green and orange zone. And as far as the medical things are concerned, I will say when you are stepping out from your home, consider that every other person is a COVID infected patient. So, if you consider it, and then only prevention, because the infection is spread through the droplet infection. Any person who is coughing, he brings out the droplets along with his cough and his sneezing. So, every person should wear a mask. You should also wear a mask when going out of your house. Keep the social distancing, as we are saying, if possible a 2-meter distance, and sanitize your hand frequently. At the home and office places, you wash your hand frequently with the soap and water for 20 seconds. If in the marketplace, so water is not available and you feel that you have just some contaminated thing, then sanitize your hand with a alcohol-based, 70% alcohol-based sanitizer. If we keep only these 3 things in place, then we will be able to prevent the spread of the infection, because that is the only way till some specific antiviral drug come or some vaccination come, which is not likely come in a very soon. So, only keeping all these minimal precautions, we can prevent the spread of the infection and can save our country from the disaster.
Absolutely. And coming to you now, Mr. Iyer, imagine a country of the size and scale such as India with 1.3 billion people and counting in lockdown for 54 days and counting. Does that speak to you about the resilience of the Indian public at large, also the coordination that takes between the center and the states to get this thing on and to maintain an absolute focus on, as Doctor says, not fritter the good work done so far?
Yeah, it has involved actually a lot of effort from the central government, from the state government, and above all from the citizens, from the people.
Indeed.
See, the fact that if you look at how the lockdown has been implemented, I would say that almost 95 to 98% of people have cooperated. People have understood why this lockdown was necessary and why they have to subject themselves to this kind of hardship.
So, as the PM said, it's a people's-led movement.
It's a kind, I feel that if you look at our size and look at our demography and look at the variety of our sections of our population, it's not an easy thing that has happened. Yes, there have been instances where we have had a single source infection, which has led to certain problems in some states. But at the same time, there are also places where the enforcement of the lockdown measures has not been so strictly enforced, or the people there have not strictly adhered to certain places. And in those areas, we are already seeing how the incidence of the cases have gone up and how the challenge has become more serious. So that means that we can do it if we really understand the purpose behind it, and we have done it. And for those areas which are already facing the brunt of the disease, because A, the lockdown was not strictly implemented, B, personal measures like wearing a mask, using sanitizers, where they have not been enforced or where they have not been carried out, we are already seeing what has happened. Therefore, you have the dangers of not following the necessary code, and at the same time, where it has been done, the results are good. And we must remember, this lockdown, which has been followed by a large majority of people, has given us that time that was necessary to create those medical infrastructure facilities. We have had special COVID hospitals, more number of beds, ventilators have been kept ready. So all these has been possible because a large sections of our population patiently followed the lockdown. So today, as we gradually open up, if there are incidents of cases, at least today, the medical authorities are more confident than they were 2 months ago.
And coming to you, Dr. Varshney, one more time on this discussion on the lockdown 4.0. Now, people say that one has to learn to live with the coronavirus for the foreseeable future. Why? Because we do not have a vaccine just yet. And a vaccine might take anything from 12 to 18 months or more. So is social distancing or wearing a mask and all the precautions the only viable alternative to combating, to breaking the chain and beating the virus?
Yes, it is true that this is a new virus and we do not know the behavior of the virus, but it is most likely going to persist for a longer time until we are able to find some specific antiviral medication or the vaccine, which is not very likely in the near future.
Right.
The only strategy to prevent the infection, and simple, naturally this should be a new norms of the societal
The new
behavior.
normal.
New normal.
Right.
And so we should avoid the large gathering as far as possible. We should avoid the crowded place as far as possible. And we should, whenever we step out from our house for some essential thing like taking some milk, vegetables or
Right.
any essential services, we should follow the simple guideline. We should wear the mask.
Right.
We should keep the social distancing as far as possible. We should sanitize frequently our hand, and as government has emphasized, we should take the Arog Setu in our mobile phone also,
Right.
because that will show whether you are likely to be
Absolutely.
infected or you are safe, and
Indeed.
it will give you some sort of moral boosting to you
Absolutely.
also.
I'll ask my guests to stay on for the next part of the News Night show tonight. In the meantime, let's now shift focus to the other big news we are tracking here on DD News and DD India. It has to do with the fifth and final tranche of economic stimulus package unveiled by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman this morning. What are the key thrust areas of reforms? Find out in the next report.
Reform was the central theme of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's press conference on Sunday. Clearly, the focus of the fifth and final tranche of Rs 20 lakh economic stimulus package was on 7 sectors, including Manrega, education and health.
Today, I have 7 such steps to tell you. First one is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Second is on health, and both in rural and urban. And together with it, I put an during the COVID period, education-related steps that have been taken. So that's a second. Third is on businesses and COVID. Fourth is on decriminalization of the Companies Act. Fifth is talking about ease of doing business and related matters. Sixth is on public sector enterprises related matters and the policy thereof. Seventh, state governments and resources related to state governments.
Nirmala Sitharaman announced an additional 40,000 crore rupees for the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It would come as a huge relief for the migrant laborers who have returned home from various parts of the country.
A lot of workers are going back to their villages, and we've made provision so that they can also join in if they want to enroll in Manrega. So government will now allocate an additional 40,000 crores.
Finance Minister also announced a series of measures for education sector in general and online education in particular. She said that the Prime Minister e-Vidya program for multi-mode access to digital or online education will be launched immediately. It will consist of Diksha, a One Nation, One Digital platform facility for school education. There will be one earmarked TV channel for all classes from class 1 to class 12. Swayam Prabha DTH channels will support and reach those who do not have access to internet. There will be extensive use of radio, community radio stations and podcasts. Special e-content will be available soon for visually and hearing impaired children. Top 100 universities will be permitted to automatically start online courses by 30th May. And Manodarpan, an initiative for psychological support of students, teachers and families for mental health and emotional well-being, will be launched soon. Health sector reforms were also on the government's agenda. Public health labs will be set up in each and every district of the country. In addition, the law will be amended to prevent attacks on healthcare workers.
Reforms and initiatives have been put in place. Public expenditure on health will be certainly increased. Investments at the grassroots level will be ramped up for health and wellness centers, both in the rural and urban areas.
Finance Minister also announced that Indian public sector companies will be able to list their securities directly in foreign jurisdictions. Private companies which list non-convertible debentures on stock exchanges will not be regarded as listed companies, which will enable ease of doing business in the country.
Now companies can list their securities directly in foreign jurisdictions. So this is one big step forward for Indian companies. And then second, listings of non-convertible debentures on stock exchange will not be regarded as those companies as listed companies.
Finance Minister added that the government has decided to decriminalize Companies Act violations involving minor technical and procedural defaults. 7 compoundable offences have been altogether dropped and 5 other will have to be dealt with under alternative framework.
Decriminalize most of the sections in Companies Act where you have violations which are technical and procedural in nature. So we want to decriminalize all of them. Then compoundable offences where there are, they can now be tried under internal adjudicating mechanism, and this way, one, it becomes simpler, it can be sorted out at the local, the local internal adjudicating mechanism route rather than go to the courts.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's pledge of total spending of rupees 20 lakh crores or about $265 billion to weather the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic under Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan is about 10% of India's GDP in 2019-20 and ranks behind stimulus provided by Japan, the US, Sweden, Australia and Germany. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Now, the Indian industry has welcomed the latest announcements by the Finance Minister. Is a report on the reactions pouring in.
Prime Minister on Tuesday announced a campaign to make the country Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant India, and an economic package of 20 lakh crore rupees was also announced. On Sunday, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the 5th installment of the package. Major announcements have been made for several key sectors. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also welcomed the announcement. He tweeted, and I quote, "Measures and reforms announced by the FM today will have a transformative impact on our health and education sectors. They will boost entrepreneurship, help public sector units and revitalize the village economy. Reform trajectories of the states will also get an impetus." Union Home Minister Amit Shah applauded the economic package announced by Finance Minister in a tweet message. He said, "Today's announcement by Modi government will go a long way in realizing the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat. These steps will prove to be a game changer for health, education and business sectors, which will provide employment to crores of poor. I thank Prime Minister and Finance Minister." Union Information and Broadcasting Minister also called it a historical step to boost the economy. In a tweet, Prakash Javadekar said, "The package of rupees 20 lakh crore, which touches all aspects of the economy and gives something to all classes, is historical. Congratulations to Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi." Several ministers have also welcomed the announcement made by the Finance Minister.
किसान से लेकर मजदूर तक, खेत से लेकर खलिहान तक, डेयरी से लेकर के फेरी वाले तक, हर तरफ उनके सरोकार, उनके समस्याओं के समाधान के संकल्प से भरा हुआ ये तमाम रिफॉर्म है.
Chief ministers of many states have lauded the efforts of the government in boosting the economy.
राज्य जिस बात की मांग कर रहे थे कि FRBM की सीमा को 3 से 5% किया जाए, आज इस मांग को भारत सरकार ने 1 वर्ष के लिए अपनी सहमति दी है.
जो राज्यों को और जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट जो राजकोषीय घाटा था उसकी जो सीमा 3% थी उसको बढ़ाकर 5% करने का और ऐलान किया है. उसका देश के सभी राज्यों को और काफी बड़ा लाभ मिलेगा.
Captains of the industry have also applauded the announcements made by the Finance Minister.
Honorable Finance Minister has also strategically targeted the package to for the poor. And this is very, very important, building health and education capabilities and also unleashing tremendous power of industry to contribute to employment as well as for national development.
Education sector has been taken care of. Health infrastructure, making us ready for the future should there be any concerns with pandemics like this.
The healthcare sector in India has been amongst the most neglected sectors, and this gets much needed focus with a great ground level rural thrust for the first time.
The government has announced an additional allocation of 40,000 crore rupees for the Manrega. The workers have expressed gratitude over the decision.
काम मिल रहा है यहाँ पे, जब हम मांग करते हैं तो उनके आधार पर ग्राम सेवक जी सभी को काम दे रहे हैं।
सोशल डिस्टेंस का पूरा ध्यान रखते हैं सर, बहुत जगह लंबी चौड़ी पड़ी है इस तालाब में, तो हम बहुत दूरी रख के काम करते हैं और वो सैनिटाइज जो है रोज आ जाता है और हम करते हैं, रोज करके ही जाते हैं और आते वक्त एक बार और कर लेते हैं, दिन में और करते हैं।
Teachers have also welcomed the steps taken by Finance Minister for further expansion of online education.
Today we received announcements regarding education, and they have announced 12 education channels, that is from class 1 to class 12. We have a lot of TV channels. Each class is having a channel. It was really amazing.
The measures announced by Finance Minister are very significant for the economy, and people from all walks of life have welcomed the steps taken to boost the economy. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
All right, before I go back to my guests, I want to recap for the benefit of you, the viewer, some of the big takeaways from the 20 lakh crore rupee economic stimulus package. Take a look at these graphics on the wall behind me. First up is the 5 pillars of self-reliant India. What are those 5 pillars? First is economy, second is infrastructure, third is technology-driven systems, fourth demography, and fifth demand. Next up is the structural reforms in 8 key sectors. What are those 8 key sectors? We have them right here for you: coal, minerals, defense, airspace management, aviation, power, space, and nuclear energy. Now, let's recall the 5 tranches, starting with the first tranche, which deals with 25% cut in TDS or TCS rates till 31st March 2021, relief to real estate sector, moving on to deadline for completion of housing projects extended, followed by rupees 90,000 crore liquidity injection for power distribution companies, and rupees 30,000 crore special liquidity scheme for non-banking financial companies, microfinance companies, and housing finance companies. Next up is the EPF contribution reduced for businesses and workers for 3 months. Now, it will provide more take-home salary for the employees. It will also give relief to employers in payment of PF. Now, the definition of MSME has also been revised, and collateral-free automatic loans will be available for the MSME sector as well. Next up is the second tranche of the package announced by the FM, the 30,000 crore for farmers through NABARD. Next up is job creation for tribals or Adivasis, extension of credit-linked subsidy scheme for middle-income group of people of annual income of rupees 6 to 18 lakhs. Moving on to rupees 5,000 crore special credit facility for 50 lakh street vendors, affordable rental housing scheme for migrant workers or urban poor, and one nation, one ration card, which means free food grains for all migrants for the next 2 months. Right, moving on to the third installment of the package, a new law to enable farmers to sell crop to sell at an attractive price, rupees 500 crore for beekeeping industry, and rupees 4,000 crore for herbal medicinal plant farming, and rupees 15,000 crore for improving animal husbandry infrastructure, and rupees 20,000 crore for Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana or the fisheries sector, and rupees 1 lakh crore for agri-infrastructure as well. And now to the fourth tranche, which talks about FDI in defense manufacturing, hiked to 74%. Now, that's a path-breaking announcement, followed by corporatization of Ordnance Factory Board. Restrictions on utilization of the Indian Air Force airspace to be eased for increasing efficiency of passenger aircraft. Now, this will cut fuel usage and time as well. Also, 6 more airports will be privatized, and India to become a global hub for aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul. An introduction of commercial mining in coal sector, entry of norms to be liberalized, nearly 50 blocks to be offered very soon, and new rules for mineral sector as well, and moving on to space and atomic energy sectors as well. And now to the fifth and last tranche. Now that talks about allocation for the MGNREGA up by rupees 40,000 crore rupees, public expenditure on health to be increased, and decriminalization of Companies Act violations. Now this will declog the criminal courts as also the National Company Law Tribunal. Also, education sector reforms as well. So that's the information we have collated over the last several weeks now of the 5 tranches. Time for a very short break here on News Night. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion with our guests. Don't go anywhere.
Hospitalized on 17th of March, and today I'm finally getting discharged after testing negative twice for COVID-19. I was kept at SVP for a month. It's been a long journey, but I would like to thank everybody from doctors to all the housekeeping staff to everybody who has looked after me at the hospital. I have absolutely no complaints. I am very happy with the sort of treatment that I got.
Dr. A.K. Varshney from RML Hospital in New Delhi, Ms. Shekhar Iyer, a senior journalist, and Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, editorial director of Business Standard newspaper. If I can come to you, Mr. Bhattacharya, first on the second segment of the show tonight. Your sense of the big takeaways from the 5 installments of the economic package that deal with all the 5 pillars of self-reliant India, economy, infrastructure, technology-driven systems, demography and demand, in particular, the 8 key sectors targeted under this stimulus package. Right, Mr. Bhattacharya, if you can hear me, I just wanted to get a sense from you to begin with of what you made of the stimulus package that deals with the 5 pillars of the self-reliant India, that talks about economy, infrastructure, technology-driven systems, demography and demand, and those 8 key sectors that were targeted under the stimulus package announcements.
Well, I think the stimulus package addresses the concerns of all the key sectors which were damaged or had experienced a major disruption and a setback because of COVID-19 in the lockdowns. As your reporter beautifully explained, it started with the MSME sector, which is the micro, small, and the medium enterprises sector. That for them, that was the largest, around 6 lakh crore of package. Then came the farmers, then came the migrant workers, and after that, you had the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which was announced actually in the beginning, but there were major, about almost 1.7 lakh crore was announced for them. But then, in my view, the 20 lakh crore of whatever, financial allocations in terms of credit, in terms of guaranteed loans that have been given. But more important than the financial allocation in this package is the indication of a shift in the way the economic policies will be run in this country from now on, taking advantage of the COVID-19 and the lockdown. The one big shift is looking at the manner in which India will liberalize its public sector companies by allowing only 1 to 4 public sector companies operate in the strategic sector and letting other public sector companies to be privatized. I think that's a big move. We have to see how this is actually rolled out. And the second big move, in my view, is the defense sector. And this defense sector move has got 3 clear components. At one level, the government has allowed 74% of FDI in weapons and platforms, which is a big move. It's actually a globally strategic move, allowing the big global defense players to come into the country. And at the same time, then the second part of this package is that banning a list of weapons and platforms to be imported.
Right.
In other words, that while you are banning the import of these weapons and platforms and asking those manufacturers abroad that if you want to send your weapons and platforms to India, you better come to India, and your grievance was that we are not allowing FDI beyond 49%, so that has been raised to 74%. As you know, India is the largest importer of arms and weapons. So therefore, India has taken a very calculated strategic move by raising the FDI, making it attractive for the foreign investor, and at the same time, forcing that move by banning imports of weapons and platforms.
Indeed.
And the third element of the defense strategy is that the Ordnance Factories Board, which has got around 41 factories, employing more than 80,000 people, and producing weapons and arms of more than 6 to 7 lakh crore annually. Now, those Ordnance Factories Board will be corporatized. In other words, they will become listed companies. And therefore, they will be open for private sector collaboration, or even the foreign companies which want to come to India and use Indian workers and Indian resources and India as a market, they can come and use that. So I think both on the defense as well as in the MSME sector, and there are many other sectors, for example, the aviation sector.
I'll come to the other sectors in a bit, Mr. Bhattacharya, but if I can bring in my other guest, Mr. Iyer, to begin with. Mr. Iyer, some would say this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for India to get it right, so to speak. And do you think the focus on the structural reforms in those 8 key sectors, ranging from coal to nuclear energy and defense and aviation, India and the government has stayed on the message and taken the right steps at the right time, so to speak?
I think never before we have seen a situation where certain things were very badly needed, but somehow or other a decision was delayed or was not forthcoming. But here is a moment, you have a crisis on hand, but the only way out is for you to reform. Indeed. Because Prime Minister always used to say, you have to reform so that you can transform and then perform. But here is a situation which the pandemic has thrown up, which is either you reform or you perish. Because ultimately we have reached a situation, some of these sectors, for instance, the defense sector, or even agro-processing sector, they needed a kind of thrust that has now been given by these reform measures. Because if you delay it any further, or if we go back to the same old ways of running around circles, we are not going to move forward. And essentially the Prime Minister's address, that when you are having a concept of self-reliance, which was made very clear, this is not return to a period of protectionism or isolationism, but rather this is a period where you look at your assets, you look at your potential, and you see what can be given that kind of freedom to grow and develop. So what we are seeing is a mix of measures which includes some stimulus, also a lot of liquidity, and then structural changes, the systemic changes that can take it forward when the lockdown ultimately ends and the economic activity restarts. That kind of thought has been gone into this, and this has not come as something that has come as an overthought, but rather a lot of planning has gone in, lot of discussions with the concerned industry, because a lot of feedback has been going on. Because prior to the pandemic, you had a situation where we were talking of slowdown, ways to come out of the slowdown. So here you are seeing a package of measures that takes care of the pre-COVID situation and prepares for the post-COVID situation.
Indeed. Dr. Varshney, from your standpoint, now everybody wants to know who will get to the vaccine first, vaccine for coronavirus, and would you give our viewers a sense of how India is best placed to either work its way on its own or in tandem with other countries and agencies around the world to develop a vaccine so that all of us can be insured against COVID-19 going forward as well? So what's the state of play as far as vaccine development goes and India's role in it?
Many countries are trying to develop the vaccine. The Oxford University is developing a vaccine. based on the chimpanzee adenovirus, which has been spiked with the S protein of this novel coronavirus, and they are quite hopeful of successful. And one Indian company is also collaborating with them.
I see.
And if it is successful, then we will be able to get the vaccine soon also. Then the American company, Israel company, and many other companies are trying to get the different type of vaccine. Even China is trying to get the different type of vaccine. So this is the one vaccination aspect. Another, we are working on the other vaccines which were already available, like the BCG vaccine or the Mycobacterium W vaccine, which we are working as a immunopotent, increasing our immunity level. The what we call the immunomodulator. They are not directly containing the virus, but they will enhance our immune system to fight the virus. So this is the another aspect. So everywhere is working. At least 5-6% in the different world are working very seriously on the vaccine, and hopefully some breakthrough comes early so that mankind is saved from this novel coronavirus.
Indeed. Gentlemen, I am nearing the end of the discussion. So one last time to get to my guests on the show tonight, starting with you, Mr. Bhattacharya. Your thoughts on whether this stimulus package and the 5 installments of it will help the Indian economy take a quantum jump, as the PM says, and not just satisfied with an incremental change going forward. Your thoughts, Mr. Bhattacharya?
In the enterprise and the ability of the private sector is tremendous. In a sense that if you look at the entire package and the various measures, it has tried to give more play, more room for economic activity by the private sector. Whether you look at allowing the commercial mining of the coal sector, whether you are seeing that for the first time, the Indian Space Research Organization will be encouraged to collaborate with the Indian private sector to undertake activities and projects in the space sector. Similarly, in the case of privatization of the distribution power distribution companies in union territories, and encouraging private sector to set up new airports, as many as 6. Now, if you look at all these areas, you do see that the government has shown greater faith and hope that the private sector will be able to reclaim its animal spirit and help revive economic activity and spur growth.
Indeed. And Mr. Iyer, to you one last time on this discussion tonight. You think this package has welfareism at its core, and it reflects what PM calls human-centric development?
Yeah, I feel that this is a empowering kind of package which takes care of the needs of the immediate needs, as well as lays the road open for all of us to take advantage of what is on offer. So therefore, I think one has to look with hope and confidence in our ability and potential, because that's the big thing that comes out. If you look at in terms of what we can do in agriculture, what we can do in agro-processing, or we can look at defense sector, any sector that is today thrown open for competition, that is thrown open for entrepreneurship, shows that we can do it, and there is a lot more that is possible. Though the immediate concerns are how do we get out of this pandemic situation, but then there is always a tomorrow, and there is always a sunrise.
Absolutely, always a tomorrow, says Mr. Iyer. And Doctor, I'll give you the last word, Dr. Varshney. Your thoughts on the lockdown 4.0 and what can Indians expect going forward? Will we be able successfully to break the chain and beat the coronavirus now that we have not peaked yet? A peak might come sometime later this year, but are we well prepared to meet any eventuality?
Yes, the lockdown has helped us in decreasing the exponential rise of the cases also, and also increasing the medical infrastructure. We could get the more COVID dedicated beds, ICU beds, ventilator, PP kits and N95, which we were not able to, we were not having. Now it is being manufactured in the country. So we are more prepared as far as the infrastructure. We are more prepared as the psychological level also, and everybody now understands the disease. What is the disease, and we have to live with this virus for a long time, and definitely we have prevention is the only strategy for the time being.
All right.
So everybody of us should do the same 3 things which I am telling repeatedly. When you go out from your house, wear the mask, keep the social distance, and sanitize your hands, and possibly we will win this war against the coronavirus.
Absolutely. On that optimistic note, I want to thank all my 3 guests, Dr. Bhattacharya, Mr. Iyer, and Dr. Varshney, for joining us on News Night tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right, let's now get you some more news from around the country. Indian Railways is operating Shramik special trains from various parts of the country to provide relief to stranded migrant labor. Here's a report.
In a major move towards providing relief to stranded migrant laborers all across the country, Indian Railways has been running Shramik special trains in various parts of the country. 2 Shramik special trains reached UP's Hardoi on Sunday, carrying 874 stranded laborers from Mohali and 1,508 laborers from Ludhiana in Punjab. All the laborers were sent to their places of final destination in the buses provided by the state roadways, and they were allowed to board the buses only after intensive medical examination.
पंजाब में फंसा था, मैं वहाँ से मुझे लाया गया है, ना किराया पड़ा और खाना भी मिला है। पंजाब में फंसा हुआ था, वहाँ से लाया गया ट्रेन से, और मोदी जी का धन्यवाद। लॉकडाउन में चंडीगढ़ फंसे हुए थे, वहाँ से मैं लॉकडाउन पे लाया गया और ट्रेन पे खाना मिला, हर सुविधा मिली। मोदी जी का बहुत धन्यवाद।
लगभग 248 यात्री आए थे। उन यात्रियों की 5 मेडिकल टीमों द्वारा स्क्रीनिंग की जा करके बसों के माध्यम से उनको गंतव्य स्थान तक पहुंचाया गया। उनको भोजन और पानी की समस्त व्यवस्थाएं की गई। किसी प्रकार की कोई समस्या नहीं आई थी।
Nagalapalli Jellore Shramik special train reached Hindon city in Rajasthan with migrant laborers who were stranded in Telangana. Out of 900 laborers, 209 deboarded at Hindon city railway station. All of them belong to the Karoli district in Rajasthan. They were deboarded under supervision of officers of the railways and district administration. After medical examination, they were seated in the buses en route to their respective homes following social distancing norms.
हमको जो भी फैसिलिटी रहा वो सब मिला है और ठीक सफर अच्छा हुआ।
सफर तो अच्छा रहा, आराम से आई मैं।
कैसा रहा आपका सफर?
ठीक रहा बेटा, बिल्कुल अच्छा रहा।
जो भारत सरकार ने रेलवे का ये चलाने का मुहिम चलाया, बहुत बढ़िया लगे। इससे हम अपने घर पहुंचने।
Beside laborers, people stranded in various parts of the country are also reaching their destination by special trains which are being run by Indian Railways. 30 special trains are being run across the country at present. Passengers who have availed this facility have expressed their happiness and gratitude towards the government.
वो जो फंस गए उनको जाने के लिए रेलवे ने एक अच्छा कदम उठाया जिससे हम लोग काफी खुश हैं और हमने टिकट किया, ऑनलाइन टिकट किया, जिसमें कि रेलवे ने ऑनलाइन का सुविधा दिया कि ताकि सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग अच्छे से मेंटेन हो सके।
People also praised the sanitation facilities and cleanliness drive and social distancing norms that were maintained in the trains.
With a confirmed ticket, people were allowed to board the train, and there was proper checking of the temperature as well. And whosoever with a high temperature was not allowed to enter the station. Only with the normal temperature people were allowed.
A special train reached Delhi from Bengaluru. Passengers on board this train expressed their happiness and thanked the government for providing this facility. All those who deboarded the train were permitted to go home after medical examination. Railway Minister Piyush Goyal has asked the collectors of each district to prepare a list of migrant labourers and contact the nodal officer of the respective state so that maximum number of labourers can avail this facility. Since 1st of May, Indian Railways has been operating special Shramik trains to carry migrant labourers stranded in various parts of the nation. News Night Desk, DD India.
Right, moving on, Air India has clarified about news on resumption of domestic flights. It said that Air India bookings will only be resumed after instructions from the government. The national carrier also said that resumption of flights in any case is not under the purview of Air India. In the second phase of the ongoing Samudra Setu mission of the government to repatriate Indians from various parts of the world, Indian Navy ship INS Jalashwa carrying nationals has reached Kochi. And that's a wrap on News Night, but news continues here. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. But before I take leave of you, as a reminder, Lockdown 4.0 has been extended till 31st May. So please practice social distancing, wear a mask, and most importantly, keep washing your hands with soap. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.